Our book, The Condor Shadow, was about human beings and their effect on North American wildlife. Written by a senior ecologist at the Environmental Defense Fund, David S. Wilkove explores the unforeseen outcomes humans have had on the North American landscape. He argues we don't often understand wildlife until it is stressed or degraded. The book took you on a journey through 8 unique biomes found in North America and how each one has been individually affected by humans. Using concepts we've learned in class, we will break down the biomes individually and show how humans are doing their best to salvage what wildlife we have left. This is the Condor Shadow. My chapter covered the history of species found within American forests and national parks. Topics covered in class include biomes, speciation, extinction, and conservation. One of my chapters was on the eastern deciduous forests. This was the first biome European settlers encountered when reaching America. It was once full of wildlife, however, it was never pure. Native Americans had used the land for centuries for farming and hunting. They often burnt the forest to create grassland for game animals. However, when European settlers arrived, America's resources became the epicenter of world trade. Fur-bearing animals, such as otters and beavers, were killed for the fur trade. But certainly, the highest impact they had was on songbirds. Once abundant in America, America's very own parrot species, the Carolina parrot, shown here, was hunted to extinction because of its pretty feathers. The ground nesting passenger pigeon was pushed out by overcrowding and deforestation. Though humans tried to create nesting areas for the pigeon in the early 1900s, the pigeon species died out sometimes in the mid-1940s. My other chapter was about the wildlife of Yellowstone Park, mainly the elk. I'm sure you've seen elk around the Rocky Mountains, but they've always been a beloved species in Yellowstone. In the 1800s, the elk were protected by the National Park Service at all costs. This meant protecting the lands that the elk roamed on and killing all the predators that threatened the elk. Keystone species such as the mountain lion and wolverine were hunted to near extinction, while the gray wolf was completely eradicated. This led the population of elk to skyrocket in response. Although numbers are hazy due to poor recording, what we do know is that Yellowstone lost many of its shrubs and taller grasses, which meant that wintering areas were sparse. They lost many elk, but let the species recover before trying to hunt them in 1960. However, this proved ineffective at culling the herd, so Park Services reintroduced the wolf in the 1980s. They thrived in the new environment and balanced out the population of elk as well as coyote, which left small game foods such as ground squirrels and other species to those who existed in the park before, such as owls and rattlesnakes. The authentic practice of science that related to my chapters was many routes in the process. Scientists in the National Park Service tried to save the elk in many ways before finding what way worked best. As new technologies and methods came out, scientists made observations and adjusted their predictions based on their new findings.
In my chapter, there are 3 main types of grass. In my chapter, 3 grasslands included are tall grass, mixed grass, and short grass. And in the late 1900s and early century, the Native Americans would set the fire throughout the grasslands to communicate with other people. In the book, it states the domestication of the Central Plains is what happens when important natural processes are disturbed. And this basically means that when the natural processes get messed up within, that is when you must go and tame the problem so that it can be fixed. Also in this chapter, troubled waters, pollution was the main problem. And with the Cleveland River, basically it got filled with a bunch of garbage and chemical toxins, and eventually it couldn't take anymore, so it ended up setting on fire. But this was not the first time it caught on fire. So the way humans helped prevent this, the Congress ended up passing the Clean Water Act, and in which their main goal was to restore and maintain the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of the waters. And one of the authentic practice sciences that are included in my chapters is the scientific community helps ensure science accuracy. And it relates back to my topics because the way Congress wanted to make sure that the river burnings would not happen anymore within the Cleveland River, and any other rivers beyond them.
I read chapters, The Coastlines of a Continent and A Bounty at the Border. The first one, it talks about the mindless horsemen. There are 5: overkill, habitat destruction, alien species, disease, and pollution. The top picture here shows pollution, along with the middle picture, and what pollution can do to animals and how it can cause them to grow incorrectly or just die from the problems that they have. And the bottom one shows a koala, and where it would normally find trees to live in, it was habitat destruction caused all of the forests to be gone, and so now it does not have any place to live. Another part of my chapter spoke about elephant seals. They were abundant before the 20th century, and then hunters found out that they could get many pounds of oil from killing even just one. They would hunt hundreds of them all at once, and they almost hunted them to extinction, but thankfully there was an effort put by so that they could be saved again. Another species I was talking about was sea otters. Sea otters are a keystone species, which means that they must be there in order to keep the habitat correct and biodiversitized, and they almost went on the brink to extinction in 18th and 19th century because of fur trade. The thing about sea otters is that sea otters eat sea urchins, and sea urchins eat the kelp, and if the sea otters are not there to eat the urchins, then the urchins will just eat all of the kelp at once, and then there will not be any kelp left on the ocean floor, which means that species that live in the kelp do not have a place to live afterwards. This relates back to class because we spoke about this and how keystone species are so important to our lands and our oceans also. Also in my chapter, I spoke of agriculture and commercial development and how they cause different habitats to be ruined, and that causes animals to not have a place to live, which means most of them die off. Agriculture requires deforestation, which is another concept that we talked about in class, and it also ruins the soil afterwards usually, and that creates it so that even if the grass or trees want to grow back, it's very difficult for them to, and so many animals, especially throughout the Midwest, have lost their habitat and have gone extinct because of this. The Everglades used to be, as the top picture shows, very beautiful and lush, and there were places for all animals to live. But commercial development down there took away all of that, and now there are houses in the places where animals would like to live, which is why things like alligators in backyards happen. These are authentic practices of science, because deforestation and commercial development is how the process of science intertwines with society, and it causes issues, and this just creates a rift in life and how animals should be allowed to live.
My 2 chapters talked about mostly on endangered species and extinction of animals. It explains to us how we can better our natural habitat and the worries that have been creating over the years. For example, the pu'ulu bird is found in Maui and lives within 2 square miles of the whole island. In the summer of 1998, there were only 3 birds found, and soon later the bird became extinct. This clearly shows the extinction of the bird over time. Another item that Chapter 7 talked about was the oceanic and land bridge islands. An example of the oceanic island is Hawaii. Many animals migrate there to either create families or to breed with other animals. They can either swim there, float, or can catch a ride from another animal or ship. A land bridge is an item that started from a mainland and drifted away eventually. An example of that is the island of Trinidad. Other animals that are near extinction are the sea otter and the northern elephant seal. Some places that these endangered species are located are in Hawaii, southeastern coastal states, Southern California, and southern Appalachian Mountains. Many concerns that have arisen past the years are the increase of endangered plants. There are about 1,107 plants that are endangered. Another concern is that there is at least 16,000 species near extinction, and if it keeps going up at this rate,
it will be too late to take action to help what is already damaged. One last animal the book talks about is the condor. This animal is a beautiful big bird that has slowly vanished from different locations over the past years. With this in mind, not only do we as citizens need to start taking action, we need to realize that once these animals go extinct, we will never get them back. One of the authentic practice of science that was used in my 2 chapters were scientific testing. This showed the number of birds and plants that were going extinct over time, and it made it clear that there was a huge increase in endangered species.